I thought a lot about this morning. I thought a lot about this morning. I thought a lot about how difficult it can be to get a grip on someone else's hard won opinion. And if yours is different and you disagree with them, sometimes that's what you need to do. Other times you might be dismissive because you don't have the time to indulge a point of view that you feel is superfluous. I think I may understand what came directed indirectly at me, towards me, in my direction, or I intercepted or picked up on, in some ways misconstrued as being relevant towards me. I think I may understand the plea that was communicated from a Gazan adult who knew that I wouldn't remember their name. He said, I don't want to just be a nameless grave. I have thoughts. I had an identity. I'm a person. I have talents. I invested in myself. I learned and thrived and grew. And they would look at me and say, look at that Western person who had a microphone in Emerald City, who was given notoriety and folklore that was presumably unearned. And such a person would entrench in that idea and wouldn't necessarily go to the trouble of seeing my point of view, which was that I was actually in the margins and had bowed out of a lot of opportunities that you would think I would be seeking to fulfill. Like graduating at the bottom of my class in high school when I was known to be one of the brightest and studious people because of my troubles. I couldn't make things connect and seem relevant to where I was. And I was very withdrawn and deaf. And the spotlight that came my way was not unearned, but unrequested. I did at some point realize that a crime was taking place and tried to raise my profile because lies were being circulated about me by persons who my concerns about have been vindicated. One of them was arrested for a large heist, who had domination over me for a very long time. The idea of interviewing Peter Gabriel was just an exciting thing that happened to me because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or whatever you want to call it. And I did hitchhike from Pittsburgh to St. Louis just to hear Fripp play. I did do that. It wasn't to grandstand, it was just to show my appreciation. I liked that person. And I missed their concert in Pittsburgh. Through no fault of my own. It's very sad for me. I didn't think my troubles were related to politics. I thought it was street crime that was just very entrenched in the East End of Pittsburgh. I realized that these besieged navigators of disaster have talked to very specifically over the years with the help of the people who I am accused of ingratiating myself to. In other words, these anonymous individuals actually have more power and access than they're admitting. They get a lot of feedback from the Jeffrey Corporation, from Yoko Ono, from Amanda Harcourt, from Brian Eno, from Yanis Varoufakis, Matt Kennard, and so on. And they've chosen adversarial politics towards me. So the nameless grave has to do with, it's posed as envy of one man towards another for recognition reasons. As though it's my fault that Chinook Coupon bookliked my poem, The Hero. It's not my fault. I wasn't even consulted when they printed that poem. Real change related to Chinook. And I'm not trying to strip away the good things I find in the often hated Ayn Rand, and she's not a particularly, she's wrong about a lot of things. But when it comes to sincere and genuine gifts of appreciation, I don't want to diminish in any way by questions of house arrangements my deep admiration for the appreciation, my approval of the young poet in Gaza who I admire so much. I quite sincerely feel that my work in poetry, for all its merits, achieved most importantly for me the ability to fathom her gifts of interpretation and time. And I deeply admired that. And I was glad that I had studied poetry so that I was in position to respond. And I'm not trusting my viewpoint isn't wanted. I never said it was. In fact, I was very careful to say that I think Palestine belongs to the Palestinians. It's their world to work out. Israel shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But aside from that, there are international features to the strategy of the global theologists that gobsmacked the supernova rave, the rave in Seattle, which was a MAGA type massacre, that leave me wondering what's going on. And I guess what I'm getting to is the idea that somebody would say, you're wrong, how dare you, what right do you have? You have a lot of nerve crossing wires with your beliefs when we're dealing with realities that nobody hears. And their reality that nobody hears has to do with the way that World War II was a turning point for the establishment of Israel. And Israel got carried away and turned into an apartheid regime of Zionism. I'm not disputing that. I just think the situation is more complicated than that. And they would say you're tormenting us, maybe, because you have a louder audience, even though I don't have any audience for it at all. So what I'm doing is a minority opinion. Now, as for fair play, you will find that I was inconsolable about the bombing of schools and historic landmarks in Gaza. Absolutely inconsolable. Why? Because I know how hard it is to study and work in situations of deprivation, and admire how scholarly and talented, and even wish that I could learn more from Palestinian academics and concerned persons for Palestine, in whose shadow I'm just a flunky. Inconsolable. And I believe that preservation is one of the hopes for the survival of Palestinian culture. We must retain and preserve any relics or photographs or scraps of paper that remain authentic. I'm not talking about hawking things. I'm not in the market for souvenirs. I'm just taking the point of view of a person who lived in Chinatown of Seattle, where preservation is a key ethic of the society I kept for over 10 years. And among the things that need to be preserved are what are known as minority opinions. Minority opinions sometimes will out, but at best, it's because they are evaluated and peer reviewed and found more truthful, more persuasive, and more worthy and more contributing of a viewpoint than the majority opinion was seemingly at the time. Now, nobody ever believed that segregation, though lawful, was contributing to anything other than the oppression of black people. So it's not always that people who vote for a majority are somehow misunderstood as having misunderstanding the situation. They're just oppressors and somehow manage to convince themselves that might makes right. Somebody might say, well, Matt Carrera is trying to use might to prove his opinion is truthful and right. I'm not trying to do nothing but preserve a minority opinion. It has nothing to do with nope, here comes my secret hobby is a Marines wannabe. I'm an old man and I just have seen a lot. And I'm an open book. I've explained to people of all sorts what troubles me. So this man whose name I neglected to note should be noted by someone and his views preserved and hopefully his life saved, because we can't have this going on. We can't have these kinds of challenges to academic society being so ferociously conceived that our lives are on the line just for having a point of view. You have to be free to investigate ideas. That's what academic society is really organized to protect. I work professionally in the library system. And I learned how hard it is to find answers to questions sometimes. But the ethics of the American Library Association was clear. If you have a question, you have a right to use the resources to try to find an answer. And all I'm saying is that my questions about what has happened extend to the situation that I have been inducted into by my humanity. And if you disagree or think I'm an inhumane person, I apologize. I don't mean to intrude on your civics or your values. I'm just protecting my right to understand as best I can. And believe me, I'm doing my level best to keep the door open to remedy with the Jews. I don't want to harm people. But this business had to stop a real long time ago. And I'm not going to advocate for something I don't approve of. I do approve of Palestinian suffrage. They have the right to vote in peace before the law, equality before the law. I'm not convinced of the explanation that's going around about the supernova massacre. I'm just not convinced. My sincere hope is that this horrible violence will stop because there's children who need to be tended, there's lifelong disabilities that need to be meaningfully given maintenance in society. People need to be rescued in mass. And I'm not putting the burden of this on innocent people from Gaza or Palestine. I'm doing my best to note names. But if you talk to people here, there are people who I manifestly and obviously notice, care about, and get involved with, who I simply don't, I'm deaf. Names are hard on me. I'm a trauma care patient. I didn't want to be thrust into the limelight. I didn't have the slightest idea that fascist Hans like Ringo Starr would have the slightest interest in me whatsoever. I liked some poems and songs by Peter Gabriel, Genesis, and King Crimson. And I said, if you are so moved as to include me in the periphery of your awareness group, I would be humbled. That's all. And I'm humbled and gratified that somebody from Gaza would appreciate my attention. I'm humbled and gratified in a way that is no different. I'm sorry for what's happening. I want it stopped.